You'll understand when you're a parent, Dad said casually after handing my inheritance to my brother. I cut ties that night. Days later, I got a letter in the mail. You know, I replay that moment in my head more often than I care to admit. The clink of his spoon against the ceramic mug, the rustle of a newspaper he didn't even read, and then, just like that, he said it. You'll understand when you're a parent. That's what my father told me. Casually. Like it was nothing. Like handing over everything my grandmother left me, not to me, but to my younger brother, Ryan, was just another little decision he had the right to make. Like I wouldn't get it, because I didn't have a mortgage or a child or whatever other qualifications you apparently need to not be betrayed by your own blood. He said it while sipping coffee. Calm, distant. Not even looking at me. The worst part? I didn't scream. I didn't demand an explanation. I just stood there in the kitchen, watching the steam rise off his mug, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. I always thought grief came in waves. But this? This was something else entirely. A cold snap. A stillness. The kind of silence where something inside you quietly dies. Because this wasn't just about money. It wasn't even about the house or the land or the savings that my grandmother had quietly accumulated in her old age. It was about all the years I stayed. All the years I was reliable. The one who helped pay the bills when Dad's job dried up. The one who visited Grandma when nobody else could be bothered. The one who didn't make trouble. But it didn't matter. None of it mattered. Because Ryan, Golden Boy Ryan, needed it more, apparently. Because he had a baby on the way and was building a future. I was a line in the margins. An afterthought. That night, I packed a single bag and left the key on the kitchen counter. No goodbye. No dramatic exit. Just silence. I didn't need to yell. I think part of me knew that any noise I made would only echo back at me, unanswered. And I thought that was the end of it. But then, 4 days later, a letter arrived. No return address, just my name written neatly across the front in a sharp, unfamiliar hand. I almost tossed it in the trash. Junk mail, probably. But something made me pause. And that was when everything changed. I opened the envelope standing over the kitchen sink, the paper inside stiff and neatly folded like something out of an old detective novel. The first thing I saw was the letterhead, a law firm in Chicago I'd never heard of. Beneath that, a name I hadn't seen in over a decade, Benjamin Albright Esq., executor of my grandmother's estate. That stopped me cold. I sat down, heart already picking up speed, and began to read. It wasn't long. No dramatic preamble. Just a direct line into the kind of truth that guts you with its simplicity. Mr. Chambers? This letter is being sent to you per the instructions of Margaret Evelyn Chambers, to be delivered in the event of any legal dispute or significant deviation from the execution of her final will and testament. There it was. Her name. Just seeing it in print made my throat tighten. Your grandmother expressed specific concerns during the drafting of her will. Given the past behavior of your father, she insisted on including a sealed secondary clause that overrides all others in the event of manipulation, forgery, or concealment. My eyes stopped there. Manipulation. Forgery. Concealment. The words didn't register at first. Then the page crinkled in my grip as I kept reading. According to our records, the official will you were presented with was not the most recent. In fact, the version executed by Margaret 6 months prior to her passing is still on file and legally binding. That version names you as the sole beneficiary. I froze. All assets, including but not limited to the family home, the savings accounts, and the land parcel near Creek's Hollow, are yours in full. I read that line 5 times, just to be sure it didn't change. We have reason to believe your father submitted a modified document to probate, effectively bypassing the original terms. We've already initiated proceedings to dispute the filing. Attached are certified copies of both wills, along with the notary records. We advise discretion and patience as this unfolds. I sat back in my chair and stared at the wall. My father had lied. But it was worse than that. He'd forged documents. He had taken my name off my grandmother's will, the same grandmother he barely visited, the woman who had practically raised me when he couldn't be bothered. He had rewritten history and handed it all to Ryan. Ryan, who probably didn't know a thing about it. Or maybe he did. It didn't matter. Because now, I had something they didn't expect: leverage. Proof. And a fire building inside me I hadn't felt in years. I folded the letter neatly, put it back in the envelope, and slipped it into the back of my drawer. Not because I was going to ignore it. No, because I had a plan to make. One that didn't involve confrontation or yelling or family dinners that ended in guilt and apologies. No. This would be quiet. Legal. Devastating. And this time, I wouldn't just walk away. I'd dismantle everything. I didn't sleep that night. Not from rage. Not from grief. But from clarity, cold, electric, almost surgical in how clean it felt. Like someone had finally turned on the lights in a room I'd been stumbling around in for years. All those times my dad looked me in the eye and said things like, "It's not personal." Or, "You've got to understand you don't have kids yet." Or that line he used so often it became a joke in my head. "We're just trying to do what's best for everyone." No. He was doing what was best for Ryan. Always Ryan. I took the next day off work and started gathering everything I could find. Emails from my grandmother, some dating back years, one in particular, sent the month before she passed, talking about how relieved she was that the house will be yours, like we always talked about. Old birthday cards, notes in her handwriting that mentioned the land in Creek's Hollow, a place my dad never even stepped foot on but used to scoff at, calling it a patch of weeds. Bank statements she'd mailed me once, asking for help understanding a charge my father had made. Without asking. And the will. The real one. The one the law firm had attached, stamped, and notarized and impossible to ignore. I drove to my lawyer's office the next morning, carrying the folder like it was made of glass. Nathaniel Hayes, Nate to me, was younger than most of the men in his firm, but sharper than any of them. And more importantly, he knew how to move in silence. He listened as I laid it all out. He didn't interrupt. Just took notes, leaned back, and finally asked me one question. "Do you want this cleaned up, or burned down?" I looked him in the eye. "Burn it down." But quietly. He smiled, just a little. "Then we start with the trust accounts." Apparently, my father hadn't just manipulated the will. He'd also set up a side account under Ryan's name, seeded with money that, legally, wasn't his to move. Grandma's savings. The proceeds from the property sale. A few offshore transfers that were sloppy enough to trace if you knew where to look. And Nate? He knew exactly where to look. By the end of the week, we had filed an injunction to freeze the assets. I didn't even have to call my father. The court order did that for me. Ryan would wake up the next morning thinking his world was intact. And by noon, it wouldn't be. Ryan called me the next day. It was early, 7:14 a.m. I remember because I was staring at the coffee pot, waiting for it to finish dripping, when my phone lit up with his name. I almost didn't answer. Part of me wanted to let him squirm. But curiosity won. "Hello?" I said flat. There was a pause, then his voice, a little too upbeat. "Hey man! Weird question, did you change the login info for the trust account?" I didn't respond. I wanted to see where he'd take it. "Because, he laughed nervously. "I tried to transfer rent this morning, and it said the account's frozen. Some legal hold or something. Must be a glitch, right?" A glitch. It took everything in me not to laugh. "You should talk to Dad," I said instead. "He might know more." I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. "Wait, did something happen? You know, between you and him?" I didn't answer. I hung up. Not dramatically. Not angrily. Just a simple click. And I went back to my coffee. By noon, I got a text from my father. One line. "We need to talk. Call me." I didn't reply. Nate, meanwhile, had gone full surgeon. He filed a motion to challenge the fraudulent will, pulled property records to show the house had been sold under false pretenses, and initiated proceedings to reclaim both the estate and the money. Everything was moving faster than I expected. But the best part? They didn't know how much I had. The digital trail. The emails. The notarized will. The accounts. Every thread they'd hoped would stay buried was now being pulled together like a noose. That afternoon, Nate called with an update. "They've lawyered up," he said. "But it's messy. Their guy's already asking if there's room to negotiate." I smiled. "There isn't." "Nope," Nate agreed. "But I want to give you a heads up, when this hits them, it's going to be public." "Let it be." "You sure?" I didn't even hesitate. They built a fake legacy. Let people see the cracks. And I meant it. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It wasn't even about the house. It was about pulling the curtain back, showing the world that the perfect family was just smoke and mirrors, stitched together with lies and favoritism. And now? It was unraveling fast. It hit the local papers first, a small headline buried in the business section. "Inheritance dispute filed over alleged forgery of will." My father's name was in the third paragraph. Ryan's in the fifth. Mine? Not at all. Just the original beneficiary. Exactly how I wanted it. The court documents were public now. Anyone could look them up. The original will, the forged one, the notarization under investigation. My grandmother's name was on both, but only one bore the truth. And the town? It noticed. Because everyone had known Margaret Chambers. They remembered her as kind, private, sharp, even in her 80s. The type of woman who wore pearls to the grocery store and still did crosswords in ink. And she had never liked my father. By the second week, I started getting messages, not from my family, but from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old neighbors. My grandma's church friends. A few cousins who had always kept their distance because, as one of them put it, "Your dad was always watching." They didn't say much. Just little things. A quiet, "Good for you," or, "She'd be proud." It meant more than I expected. But back home? The fallout was just beginning. I got word, not from them directly of course, that Ryan's car was repossessed. Apparently, one of the frozen accounts had been tied to his payments. Then came the eviction notice. The condo Dad helped him lease was no longer affordable on Ryan's non-existent income. The safety net had holes now. And my father? He was panicking. He sent an email. Short. Stiff. "Hubert, this has gone too far. You've made your point. Let's talk. We're still family." I read it twice. Then moved it straight to the trash. Because for once, I held the pen. I had the documents. The signatures. The leverage. I had all the things he once used to keep me compliant. And I was about to use every one of them, not for attention, not for vengeance. Just to take back what was mine. I didn't respond to the email. I didn't respond when Ryan called from a new number, leaving a voicemail that started friendly and ended with a voice crack panic. "I don't know what you're doing, but this isn't fair. You don't understand what Dad promised me, what we needed. Just call me back, okay?" I never did. Because by then, the wheels were already in motion. Nate filed for an emergency injunction to block the transfer of any remaining assets. He followed that with a motion to reclaim the house, not the one I lived in, but the house. Grandma's. The one with the creaky porch swing and yellow siding that caught the sun just right in the evenings. The one they had gutted and sold. Turns out, the buyer was having second thoughts. And for good reason. Once the forgery came to light, the sale became disputable. And once a sale is in dispute, banks get nervous. Title companies start sweating. Lawyers advise backing out. The buyer walked. And just like that, the illusion of control my father had built so carefully over the years, it began to collapse. I never confronted them. Never showed up on their doorstep demanding justice or closure. That would have made it personal. No, I let the system do it. Paperwork. Motions. Court filings delivered by polite men in suits. It wasn't theatrical. It was surgical. And slowly, quietly, I took it all back. The trust. The property. Even the remaining balance of Grandma's savings, which Nate traced through a chain of transfers so convoluted it looked like something out of a movie. Everything my father thought he could bury? I exhumed. And still, I said nothing. No announcement. No gloating. Just a single certified letter delivered to my father's address, a copy of the court order naming me as the rightful beneficiary, and heir to everything they thought they'd gotten away with. No note. No signature. Just the judgment. I imagined him reading it in his dimly lit study, the same room where he once told me I was too soft to ever make real decisions. I hoped it was quiet when he read it. I hoped the silence rang in his ears. The aftermath wasn't loud. It was hollow. Like the wind after a storm that's already broken everything it had to break. Within 2 weeks of the court's ruling, my father's name was flagged in several property databases. The local real estate office froze a pending deal he was negotiating, a side project he had planned to pass down to Ryan as part of their grand, fake legacy. The illusion cracked, then buckled. Ryan moved back in with them, not that they announced it. But I heard, small-town gossip makes fast work of secrets. He'd been couch-surfing, apparently, until a former classmate posted about seeing the Chambers kid back at the nest. I didn't feel bad. Not even a little. Because while they scrambled to figure out where their next month's rent would come from, I was sitting across from Nate in a quiet office, finalizing the paperwork to transfer everything into my name, legally, permanently, and without contest. He slid the final set of documents across the table. "There it is," he said, tapping the page. "It's all yours. No loose ends." I stared at the signature line for a long moment. My name, ready to be inked into the life they tried to erase me from. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt clean. Not revenge. Not victory. Just balance. The kind I hadn't known in years. I signed the papers and pushed them back. "Now what?" Nate asked. I smiled faintly. "Now I disappear." And that's exactly what I did. I sold off the land at Creek's Hollow, not for profit, but to a conservation group Grandma once mentioned in passing. They'd protect it. Keep it wild. Just like she wanted. The house? I didn't move in. I stripped it down, donated what was left of her belongings, then sold it under my name this time, and donated half of the proceeds to the community clinic where she used to volunteer. No ceremony. No plaque. Just a quiet transfer. And then I vanished. I left no forwarding address. No goodbye calls. No final word. The lawyer had my new contact info, but even that was routed through a secure mailbox 2 states away. I scrubbed my name from every joint account, utility, and public record I could think of. Deleted social media. Wiped the old phone clean. It was easier than you'd expect, disappearing, when no one ever really looked at you to begin with. I relocated to a coastal town where no one knew my last name. Rented a small cottage near the water. Bought a used pickup. Took a job that didn't ask questions and paid enough for peace. No one there cared about the Chambers family. No one ever asked what I had walked away from. And I never offered. At first I waited. Expected a call, a letter, some final gasp of drama. Maybe Ryan would come crashing in, demanding answers. Maybe my father would show up in person, voice low and patronizing, trying to negotiate his way back into relevance. But no one came. Because the truth is, once you stop playing the role they've written for you, they don't know how to follow the script. So they let the curtain fall. There were moments of guilt, sure. You don't undo a lifetime of programming in a day. But it passed. Every morning I walked the beach. Every night I fell asleep without bracing for a phone call asking for something I didn't have to give. And in the quiet, I started to remember who I was before all the noise. Not the bitter son. Not the overlooked brother. Just a man. Alive. Untethered. Free. Months passed. Then a year. The seasons came and went quietly in that little beach town, the days marked more by tide patterns than dates. I kept my routines simple: coffee just after dawn, walks with no destination, the kind of stillness that used to scare me but now felt earned. I didn't reach out. But sometimes, the past tried to sneak in through the cracks. A forwarded envelope arrived at my P.O. box one day, plain, no return address. Inside was a handwritten note. My father's handwriting. "You've made your point. I hope it was worth it." That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just those cold, brittle words, still trying to control the narrative. Still trying to make me the villain in his story. I tore the letter in half and dropped it in the trash. It didn't deserve fire. Another time, I got a message from Nate, short and clinical. Ryan had filed for bankruptcy. My father was selling off one of his last remaining properties. The legacy they tried to build on the back of my silence was collapsing. Quietly. Without fanfare. That was the thing about the truth. It didn't need a spotlight. It just needed time. I never felt joy from their downfall. But I won't lie, there was a kind of peace in knowing the weight was no longer on my shoulders. No more being the bigger person. No more dinners where I had to pretend I wasn't invisible. No more waiting for a thank you that never came. Some nights, I'd sit on the porch, watching the ocean roll in, and think about Grandma. About the way she always made me feel seen. She knew. She'd always known. And in the end, she made sure I had one last chance to save myself. I took it. I never looked back. Not once. I didn't go searching for closure, or try to explain myself to people who never listened when it mattered. I didn't wait for redemption, or some storybook reconciliation. That's not how real life works. Instead, I built something better, a life on my own terms. No drama. No apologies. Just peace.